All right, so today, since you're Dane Buy Local, of course, we're speaking to business owners, small business owners, local business owners. So we want to talk about planning for secession of, your exit strategy to exit for the business whenever you are ready to do so. So that is kind of the topic of today. So converting an existing business to a worker cooperative. So I'll go into some detail about conversions and that trend nationwide. And then I'll talk a little bit more about like what a co-op is and specifically what a worker co-op is. And then I'll talk about the Madison Cooperative Development Coalition and the various resources that we provide to assist you. So. All right. So again, we're talking about converting existing business to employee ownership. And it's estimated that over half of US companies with employees are owned by baby boomers. And those baby boomers are retiring age now. So the wave of baby boomer retirements and their business succession is actually happening. And it's estimated that 85% of such business owners do not have an exit strategy. So they do not have a plan. So we call this in the co-op movement, the silver tsunami, the business movement too, because this is a huge potential crisis nationwide of losing our small businesses and our local services. So it's a potential crisis. If we look just at our region in Minnesota and Wisconsin, there are approximately 110,000 businesses that are owned by people 55 years or older. And the lack of succession planning, of course, as you can imagine, means if these business owners do not have plans for succession or exit, this could lead to the loss or relocation of thousands of jobs and instability in local economies across the upper Midwest. So of course, there has been growing interest in worker co-ops partly in response to the silver tsunami, but also after the last recession in around 2008, we started to see an increase in interest in them as well. One, for just saving businesses, and then two, for all the benefits that come with worker co-ops that make them more resilient, which we'll talk a little bit about later on. So as you see, many foundations and even municipalities are funding converting existing business to employer ownership, including Madison, including Minneapolis, including some cities in California, and of course, New York City and Florida. So this is a growing nationwide trend. It's also a trend because it's been proven to address issues of workplace democracy, improve wages and working conditions, and jobs, and also especially in low wage jobs. And I should say, feel free to pipe in, of course, Steve, and then anybody else if you have questions or confusions along the way. So some of the benefits of employee ownership. It's a financially rewarding exit path for current business owners. So we can talk about tax benefits later on in the question and answer. There's, for example, the 1042 rollover. So that's one example of a tax benefit. You can also just make sure your legacy continues. You've built the business, you care about the business, you want it to continue in the community. And so you can maintain your legacy this way. It also rewards employees for their role in building the business. They've been helping you to build the business, help it keep running, so you can continue that. It has a potential to improve business performance and increase employee engagement and retention because of the benefits of a cooperative workplace. It improves the workplace for the workers themselves as well. And of course, it retains services and jobs and wealth in our community. And this is an important aspect, especially when you think about small communities and rural communities outside of Madison, right? Every business matters, every job really matters. So we've talked a little bit about this trend nationwide. So let's talk a little bit about specifically what is a cooperative. So when we talk about a co-op rather than a traditional or conventional business, it's a business that is democratically owned and controlled by the people who use or produce its services. And then members who use a cooperative own it because they finance it in a variety of ways, usually through member equity. And then they control that business democratically by exercising those rights that come with their membership. And of course, they benefit directly from the cooperative based on their use of the cooperative, or in a worker co-op based on their labor contribution. And I want to take a minute to say that an ESOP, an employee stock option program, is not a cooperative. I think some of the language around ESOPs that are used give the impression that people give the impression to people that it is, but there are very distinct differences. So, you know, on Woodman's, you see employee owned. Well, that's an ESOP. Even like New Glarus Brewery, they're 100% employee owned, so that's a little bit better, but it doesn't have that same democratic member control that a cooperative does. So there are lots of different types of co-ops. What we're probably most familiar with is consumer co-ops, so credit unions. I'm a member of Group Health Cooperative in Madison, and then grocery cooperatives, of course, like Willie Street Co-op and Regent Market Co-op. And then producer co-ops. A very kind of popular example is Organic Valley, where you have dairy farmers pooling their milk together, process it, and then they market it under a common label. And now they're like $1 billion organic company. And a more recent example is a South Central Wisconsin Hemp Cooperative. So a group of organic hemp farmers that are pooling their hemps together to market under a common label, and then to sell to a hemp processing co-op. There are also multi-stakeholder co-ops. So Fifth Season is an example where you have the growers of produce and the processors and the buyers all in one co-op, and that builds equity along the supply chain. And then another example of that is the People's Organization for Community Acupuncture, or POCA, it's an example of where you have the practitioner, the acupuncturist, and the clients are members of the same co-op, and that's a nationwide one. Purchasing and shared services cooperatives. If you do go to Willie Street or Regent, you know that the bags, the cups, all those extra things are actually purchased through the National Co-op Grocers, which is a co-op of grocery co-ops, so that they purchase things in bulk to reduce prices. And then, of course, worker co-ops, which we'll be talking more about today. Madison actually has a great history of worker cooperatives. So we have several that have been around a long time, 40 years, like Union Cab, Isthmus Engineering and Manufacturing Co-op. Community Pharmacy is a worker co-op that's been around for 40 years. And then we have a couple other ones, which we can mention later, that are somewhat newer, but very established. And this is just a little glimpse of the cooperative sector nationwide. So I just want to show this to say how how prevalent actually co-ops are when we take a glance at it, and then also to recognize the great concentration of co-ops that we have in the Midwest. Okay. So in a worker co-op specifically, it is the workers themselves who own the business and are the only owners of the business. They democratically control the business, and they benefit directly from the business based on their labor contribution. So as I said, we have a lot of worker co-ops in Madison. You probably recognize some of these logos. As I mentioned, Union, but Nature's Bakery, Equal Exchange is a national worker co-op, but they have an office here in Madison. Just Coffee. I also want Interpreters Co-op is on there, Union Tech. And then along the bottom, you'll see the 5 co-ops that MCDC has so far helped to develop and to incorporate. And there are 3 more that are in the incorporation process right now. So we're really proud of working with these cooperatives that provide really important services like common good bookkeeping. Roots for Change is a co-op out of Centro Hispano of community doulas and wellness workers. Soaring Independent is a Black woman-led home care cooperative. Nina Collective is a racial equity and justice training co-op. Get It Right is an educators co-op that contracts with the recently opened Milestone Democratic School. So, and then we have, like I said, we have a couple more on the way. So we're really proud of those. Oh, and before I go on, we also, what is important to Madison's cooperative ecosystem is MadWork. It's up in the right-hand corner there, and it might be blocked a little bit by the Zoom boxes, but that is the network of worker co-op owners in Madison. So it actually is organized as a co-op, as a nonprofit cooperative, but they work to network peers together in the worker co-op world. So that's a really important resource we have, and both Steve and I are really involved in MadWork. So no matter what type of co-op we're talking about, all co-ops adhere to these 7 principles, and these have been around and have developed and evolved somewhat since they were created by the Rochdale pioneers in 1844. So, you know, co-ops are nothing new. They've been around, they've been developed, and these are all the principles that every co-op adheres to. Voluntary and open membership has to be open to those who can reasonably use the services. Democratic member control. You know, even in a consumer co-op like Willie Street, if you're a member, you have a vote, and you know, you have rights that come with that membership to control the co-op. Member economic participation. If you're a member of Willie Street too, you know that you have to pay in your equity to become a full member. So you're participating economically, you're funding that, but also you're making decisions. You see the financials, you have a vote as a worker owner or as an owner. Autonomy and independence. So even if a co-op enters into a contract with a governmental agency or another organization, they maintain their autonomy. So the autonomy stays with the owners. Education and training, both within the cooperative and to the broader public about the benefits of co-ops. Again, if people are making really important decisions about a business, you have to continue that education and that training. Cooperation among cooperatives. This is P6. This is a big one for us. Again, MadWork kind of serves that function locally to keep co-ops networked together. And you can see in my role as co-op developer, co-ops are my biggest resource. So co-ops will help new in starting co-ops, you know, help them develop and give them advice and stuff along the way. So that's a really important principle for us. Concern for community. As you probably know, most co-ops are all also concerned with the broader world around them or their broader community outside the doors of the business. And that's a really important value, that we can have these value-based businesses in our local communities. Okay, let's talk a little bit about the advantages to being a cooperative. Isthmus Engineering is a really great example of a resilient co-op. During the last recession, they came together and made collective decisions about how to handle it, right? So they didn't do any permanent layoffs. They did some shared layoffs. They accepted some work contracts at lower profit rates, but they made no permanent layoffs. But all of their competitors did, right? So when it came time, when the economy picked back up again, they were ready to take on that work because they had all their employees, you know, they were ready to go. And then they made record-breaking profits in the years following. So that ability to make, you know, both a shared, to make a shared sacrifice was critical to their success. Cooperatives also have generally higher incomes in the industry that they're in compared to other businesses. So here's an example of cleaning cooperatives. Members of Prospera, which is in the Bay Area of California, increased their median income from 24,000 to over 40,000 in an area where the median income for Latinx households is 38,000. So this is, again, I mentioned low income work, especially you see a trend in starting worker cooperatives so that the workers can capture more of the profits for one and have higher wages, but have more control over their work. When you think about home care and 24/7 jobs and having that flexible work schedule or having a secure work schedule, it makes a difference for turnover, which makes a difference in the care that that business can provide. So that's incredibly important. And that's another cooperative advantage is improved working conditions. So in worker-owned home care cooperatives, they've reduced turnover from the industry average of over 60% down to 20%. And again, this is about a better job for the workers themselves, but also better care for our loved ones. And here's members of Soaring Independent and some of their supporters at a community cookout they did a couple of summers ago now. Okay, so now we can talk more specifically about the Madison Cooperative Development Coalition and the resources that we provide. So this, we're the City of Madison funded initiative to form worker co-ops that address income inequality and racial disparities by creating living wage and sustainable jobs. This is a 5-year investment by the City of Madison. It's a $3.2 million investment, about approximately over that 5 years. And some of the money goes to MCDC, so our side of the program, and some of the money goes to a revolving loan fund that is administered by the Madison Development Corporation. So that's kind of how the funding breaks down. And that's critical because we can provide both technical assistance and then the funding on the flip side. So we're really able to walk people through the whole process. So we're a coalition of co-op developers, again, from the UW Center for Co-ops and the City of Madison Office of Business Resources. So Ruth Rolick is our project manager and keeps us connected to the city. And this is this co-op development program is actually written into the city's 5-year economic plan. So they see it as a tool of, community resilience, but also to address Madison's racial divide. We all know from the Race Equity Report and Latinx Workers Project report that we have some serious problems in Madison. So worker co-ops can actually be a tool to build community wealth and a tool to lift up communities and serve community needs. So for example, with Roots for Change and Centro Hispano, there was a need there. They had organically risen out of the community wellness program and project that Centro Hispano was running. And they're like, well, we're doing this for our community. We could turn this into jobs and have this be part of secure employment and still serve our community. So we're really able to walk them through that and provide funding. And that's a great example of how it's used as a tool for racial justice, culturally appropriate services, etc. So that's an example of Centro Hispano is an example of community-based organizations and how important they are to the work that we do. They're the ones who are on the ground. They know what is needed in the community, what is possible in the community, where the interest is. So they're really an important part of the coalition and the work that we do. So as I mentioned before, we provide technical assistance, like actually walking groups who want to start a co-op through the process. We do popular education. So before the pandemic hit, we were doing monthly co-op 101s at all the different public libraries. And then we present in different, other events locally. Now a lot of Zoom events. We also work with, like I said, Madison Development Corporation. They hold our loan fund. So I'll talk more about that in a minute. And as I said, we're talking about converting existing co-ops or existing businesses to co-ops today, but we work with both startups and conversions. So for a group that wants to start a co-op, and that group can include the employer and the employees, we could talk about some different case studies that kind of highlight how important it is when, or how beneficial it is when the selling owner is planning far ahead of time and as part of the process of converting that business to a cooperative. And that's when you really see um, businesses stay resilient, and where you see the benefits play out for everyone involved, the employer and the employees. So we can help you understand what the development process would look like. We can connect you with peer worker co-ops, both here in Madison through MadWork, but also nationally. We often connect a co-op of a certain industry to another co-op in a different city. We can connect you to local organizations for training, benefits, and resources. And again, we can help you secure financing through our lending partners. We can help you find business development support through our network of preferred providers. So we have a lot of service providers that we work with uh, that really know and are familiar with co-ops, and that's really important when you get down to, creating a business, their financials, setting up their books, when they're talking to an accountant, all those different ways in which the co-op structure is different. It's important to have those attorneys and everyone who really understands the model. And then we help cover the cost of business development assistance with grants up to $10,000. So this helps with those early explorations, talking to attorneys and lawyers, talking to the accountant, maybe some marketing plan and strategizing. So that $10,000 is really important because, especially when we're working with communities of color, that can really make the difference. Those early startup costs or those early converting costs can really be a barrier for folks. So that part of our programming is really important to be able to provide that. And we also provide grants to community-based organizations to incubate co-ops or to start to work co-op education into their own programming. So another funding opportunity we're connected to is Madison is a Kiva city. And if you're not familiar with Kiva, check it out. It's a really cool program. It's micro lending through crowdfunding. So small businesses, and this is available whether or not you are interested in converting to a co-op. Exists now. So small businesses can crowdfund a loan up to $15,000 and there's no fees, there's no interest, and you have a gracious time to pay that back. MCDC has a Kiva match fund of $50,000 so that if a co-op wants to go through the Kiva crowdfunding process, we support them, we endorse them, we help them market that. And yeah, so that's just a great opportunity with no interest and no fees for businesses, especially if they just need something very tangible, a new location, something like that. So we can also help you in that process. And then I mentioned the Madison Development Corporation and our revolving loan fund. So they provide loans up to $50,000. They look more like a traditional bank loan, but more generous, and it's more at risk a loan than they can take some more risks. The city has given them that mandate. So I just want to mention quickly the public library because we're usually doing this co-op education through the library. They've been a great resource. Martin Alvarado, who was actually a former worker owner at the Interpreters Co-op with Steve. He is now a business and technology librarian, and he's doing a great job of building up resources around co-ops as part of the library system. So, the collection of books and games and things like that, but also helpful business research databases, stuff that can really provide information for marketing and feasibility plans and things like that. And they do consultation. So I just wanted to make sure you are aware of that resource because they've been a great partner to us, and they're available to you whether, it's a great way to explore being a co-op, but they're also just available for business resources. So. And then I wanted to mention just a couple quick resources. This is a quick kind of presentation, but when you actually look at some of the examples of where this has happened, both here in Madison and in other parts of the country, they're really inspiring stories. As business owners have like put their life and their soul into starting a business and keeping it going, especially in times like these, and being able to like know that legacy is going to be maintained, but also being able to reward your employees for for helping you and being a part of it. And so it's actually really inspiring. So I encourage you to go to becomingemployeeowned.org, and that gives a lot of really great stories. They have a couple videos. So it really just gets to the heart of what we're talking about in a more meaningful way than I'm presenting today. So Democracy at Work Institute has a great set of resources on their website. They kind of run the Workers to Owners Collaborative, which we are a part of, that does this work nationwide. And then the ICA group also does a lot of conversion work. So they're a great resource, and they provide consultations and stuff. So you check them out. And of course, Steve and I are here for questions all the time, and can point you towards those, or put you in contact with any of those organizations. Okay, and then there's our contact information. And I think I made it just about in 30 minutes. So now I think we have time for questions. I know I talk fast too, so please feel free to make me repeat.
Could you give us the questions now? And Charity, there was one that Steve fielded in the chat that you maybe want to chime in on too, and I think it ties to a question I have. The question, as it was put in the chat by John, is the advantages and disadvantages of a co-op versus an outright sale to maybe a particular employee, and that was tied to a question I had, which is, do all the employees have to participate at the cooperative level, or is there sometimes variations on that?
Or no, Steve, if you've already answered, did you want to go ahead? Or
well, I gave a brief answer. I said that worker co-ops are stable. They tend to be more resilient than traditional businesses are. A lot of that has to do with what Charity was talking about with the example of Isthmus Engineering, where there's a lot of flexibility within the business owners, because the workers are the owners, and they can make decisions that a traditional owner might not make. Some other reasons I came up with are, if people are going to become business owners, I think they would really appreciate sharing the risk between each other as opposed to a single person taking that on. I think that makes a lot of sense for the owners, or for the prospective owners, shall we say. There's also tax benefits to the seller, as Charity mentioned. And then there's just, at a philosophical level, you're expanding the number of business owners out there in the world. To Val's question, do all the employees have to become owners? The answer is no, they don't all have to. Certainly, we would encourage that, but we don't require it. The minimum number of people, the minimum number of worker owners is 3. Everybody else can be an employee, a more traditional employee, but we would encourage them to be member owners as well. Do you want to take the next one, Charity?
I would just add too that there is a lot of different ways to finance the sale, and there's a lot of resources like Shared Capital Cooperative, for example, who they're national, but they're run out of Minneapolis, and they know co-ops. They're a co-op that lends to co-ops, so they will really help, for example, finance a sale so that worker owners aren't taking on so much of the risk or that cost up front. But yeah, do it in a way that it makes for a long-term financial benefit for the selling owner. So there's just a lot of different ways to finance a sale. So it doesn't necessarily require that the workers have all that up, all those resources up front. So yeah. What is the next one? I can get off my share screen and then I can see chat, but I can't when I'm sharing.
So the next question is, what type of companies may not be good candidates for co-ops?
Well, I think one point of showing you that slide with all the worker co-ops was to say that pretty much any business can be structured as a worker cooperative.
Yeah, I would agree with that 100%. I think any company can be a co-op. Now there are different considerations. Some sorts of businesses are more expensive to start up. You got to factor that in. But simply on principle, any business can be a worker cooperative of any size and any sector. If you look around the world at co-ops like Mondragon or Emilia Romagna, or some of the recovered businesses in Argentina, there's literally every sector you could think of, from low capital businesses like mine. My business we're interpreters. We have very little capital. I mean, probably under $1,000. Other businesses are very capital intensive, so heavy manufacturing, that sort of thing. That can all be done as a worker co-op, and there are examples of it. There are worker co-op bakeries, worker co-op hotels, there's a worker co-op travel agency. There are worker co-op schools. So yeah, literally any business could be a worker co-op.
It may be worth mentioning too that actually Isthmus Engineering and Manufacturing started as a partnership back in the day, 40 years ago. They decided that they wanted to have that more democratic workplace and to bring people in and to run it more democratically. And so they went from a couple of partners to incorporating as a cooperative. So.
Other questions?
Can you give us a sense of how long it would take realistically from start to finish?
Again, I would say it varies. If you got this done in 6 months, I'd be very impressed. My own business was a startup, so it's not an exact apples to apples, but it took us a year and a half.
Wow.
Yeah, it can take a while. I think with a conversion, it wouldn't take as long. There are fewer considerations, fewer ducks to get lined up, but it does take some time. It's not something that happens in the span of a week or even a month. It takes time. There are a lot of meetings involved.
Yeah, I would second that. It varies so drastically. I've been working with one co-op for 3 to 4 years to convert, but there's a lot of complications there. But my coworkers just worked with one, Snow River, and they incorporated within 6 months. So it really just kind of depends on the path you're taking, if how much work it is to get people on board. So yeah, a lot of
I would say both sides, both seller and the buyers, have a lot of thinking to do, a lot of considerations to take into account. It's entirely possible that the workers had never thought of this, and it would take them a long time to get their heads around it. It takes time for people to get used to the idea of becoming an owner, taking on that added risk, learning about management, learning how to run a business. Again, it can be done. There are examples, but it does take time.
I got questions.
Mm-hmm.
So you guys mentioned worker owner, but also I'm a owner of the Willie Street, I guess, but I'm not a worker there. What's the difference between worker owner and owner?
So at Willie Street, you are a consumer owner. So it's a consumer co-op where the consumers are the owners in a very literal and legally binding sense. So I'm an owner. I know for a fact that Charity is an owner. So the question is, what does ownership mean? What are your rights and responsibilities as an owner? Excuse me. As a consumer owner, you have far fewer rights and responsibilities because there's the board, there's the management, and there are the workers. And the difference with a worker co-op is that the workers themselves are the owners. And so the workers make the decisions, which is not the case in a consumer co-op like Willie Street or REI
Okay.
or various other examples.
So in
Credit
a
unions
worker
are all co-ops.
controlled co-op, is it, does each person have one share? And is, from a democratic standpoint, is it one share, one vote? Can
Yes.
one person have multiple shares? How's that work?
It's one person, one vote. Every worker owner in a worker co-op has exactly one share. So Charity mentioned economic commitment by the members. What that means is each member buys one share, and that the cost of that share varies widely from one co-op to another, but you buy one share, and that's the specific legal mechanism that makes you an owner. That's what you are an owner of, that share in the co-op. So
Right.
everybody gets exactly one share, everybody gets exactly one vote, regardless of how much money you've invested or how much money you've earned. Everybody gets one vote.
But there's a minimum of 3 people who need to buy into that concept to become a co-op.
Correct.
Got
Yes.
it.
You need to have 3 members to be a worker co-op in the state of Wisconsin. If you were a startup, you'd need to have 5 people sign your articles of incorporation, but 2 of them do not have to be member owners.
Right. And you guys also mentioned the tax benefits, but didn't say what are the tax benefits? I mean, just broadly.
Can you take this one, Charity?
Yeah.
Here we are.
Yeah, and I'll just add to the your response to the last question. There are ways that aside from the voting stock, the one voting stock that everyone purchases that makes them a equal and collective owner, there are ways that workers could fund the business or provide extra funding, but no matter how much funding they provide through like preferred stock and these different options, but no matter how much they provide, they only get that one vote. You know, that it's that voting share that matters. So here's you asked about the tax benefits, the 1042 rollover. This is not my area of expertise, so I really don't know a whole lot about it, and I haven't used it in any of my conversions yet. They haven't gotten to this point, but here is a slide. I kept it just in case. So it's available to both ESOPs and to worker co-ops. And it says a selling business owner can defer tax on capital gains from the sale if they sell at least 30% of the business to employees via an ESOP or a worker co-op, or reinvest the proceeds into qualified replacement properties within 12 months of sale. Yeah, and I like Googled qualified replacement properties and I read up on them a little bit. So it's easy kind of find that information, but
Right.
so those are possibilities.
Val had a really good question. What happens when an employee leaves and a new one comes in? Or owner, I should say. Really, it's not an employee any longer.
Right. I was going to type this up, but I'll just say it. When you leave a worker co-op for whatever reason, you get that purchase price back. So it's basically an investment. And then when a new person comes in, they have to also pay that membership cost.
But your initial buy-in could grow or shrink based upon the success of the business, I imagine, right?
No, the initial buy-in itself remains static. That goes into an account. Your earnings, it's not a stock that raises and lowers in value. It's just a stake, not a stock.
But the value of the business obviously goes up and down.
It certainly does, yes. But it's a privately held business. So it's not as if it's got, stock on the stock market where it's up one day and down the next. That
Right.
buy-in was a set amount that you pay in, and then when you leave the co-op, you get it back. But your actual, your share of the business as represented by your capital account, and then at year end by your patronage, that does go up and down considerably.
And it's just everything is set up in your bylaws. The co-op model is so flexible, so it's like really how you set it up in your bylaws. And so I know Isthmus in engineering and manufacturing, the cost of their equity share does go up over time slowly. They keep it tied to the cost of you know, they're such a profitable company, so they're quite different than most of the worker co-ops that we work with, but they keep their equity buy-in attached to the cost of a good used car. Again, that's, you know, we work with co-ops that range from, I don't know, I think 150 might be the lowest buy-in that we've worked with, to then Isthmus Engineering is like 14,000. And it's
Yep.
also worth mentioning that the co-op itself, there are tax benefits for the co-op itself too, you know, aside from the selling owner in that conversion process, there's a tax break for the co-op when it comes to income. They don't have to pay that first layer of tax. And there's some different tax incentives for co-ops over conventional businesses too. So just wanted to mention that. And there are examples where, as I mentioned with Isthmus Engineering, and then more recently Northwind Solar, where the business starts, you know, as an individually owned business or a partnership, and they're like, well, we'd rather actually run this as a co-op. You know, we don't want to take on all the work of, you know, running the business. We actually like doing the work. So I just wanted to kind of bring that up too. If you're in a position as a business owner and you're just like, well, I love this business. I'm not planning on retiring soon, but you know, it would be, maybe there's some benefits to running this collectively with a group of other people, and maybe it's better for the business and it's better for me personally. And it's good for the employees. So there are also examples before retirement where people decide they want, you know, to restructure their business.
So this, and maybe this is getting too far down the road. So in essence, then employees buy their share, but does the business, in terms of like the org chart and who has the various roles and how they get paid, all really looks pretty much the same and is just from the earnings of the company that's taken care of, and then there's still, you know, someone in accounting and someone in, you know, the receptionist or whatever, and that in that way it still sort of functions in a fairly or common or traditional way?
Yes, there's definitely division of labor. People have specific roles that they need to fulfill. Excuse me. So people do very specific things. However, the org chart looks quite different. Most businesses have a more or less the shape of a pyramid for their org chart. In a co-op, it's a circle. So the members are accountable to the management. The management is accountable to the board, but the board is made up of the membership itself, elected from the membership. And so it forms a loop. And here we are. This is the one.
Applied for everything.
So there's this really interesting mutual accountability that everybody in some form, in some role, is overseeing someone else. So this part is quite different from a traditional business. But if you were to walk in the door of, let's say, a community pharmacy or something like that, you wouldn't see that. You would see people doing specific jobs, playing specific roles. This part takes place, I guess you would say, behind the scenes. But you do still have a board. Typically you would have managers, and then you have the shop floor workers. So it looks at the first glance, it looks pretty typical, but this part again is quite different.
I've got another question. I'm having a hard time grasping. As a business owner, I take the risk of profitability or loss, and is not always. It's hard to make a profit, quite frankly. So I'm taking losses quite frequently. How does a cooperative handle that? If a person buys in as an owner and the business suffers a loss, what happens?
Then everyone takes that loss. That happened to my business last year, and maybe some of you can identify this. We got by because we got grants, and some of them we got through right here at Dane Buy Local. But if you look at actual revenue, we took a loss last year. And so typically at the end of the year, a profitable co-op will pay out patronage as a dividend for work. But we're not doing that because we did not have a profit last year. And so the risk and the reward are both shared equally among the workers. So you might think of it as a partnership, like a legal partnership, except that it's everybody.
But in that scenario, if you suffered a loss, the owners would have to put more money in to continue that business. So by your definition, they shared with the success, but not the failures of the business.
Oh yeah, we did. But as a business, so we had reserves, and so we were able to, not a lot of reserves, but some. And so the losses came out of those reserves.
Mhm.
So we all own those reserves. So we all took the loss in that sense.
But if you didn't have reserves, do co-ops say, hey, you know what, you need to pony in another 20,000 then what happens if
It can happen.
okay.
It's possible, or a co-op can close. It's still a business. There have been co-ops that have failed. I talked about the success rate of co-ops, and that's true, but it's not 100%. There have been co-ops that have failed and gone under.
Right.
So yeah, that's a possibility. This is not magic. This is not a guarantee. If it was, there'd be a lot more of them, but it is a good bet.
Well, I was drawn to this seminar by, however it was advertised, we're interested in maintaining our local businesses. And I can talk specifically for me at Easy Office Products. Rose and I own the business. We're 10 or 15 years away from retirement. But presently, if we wanted to exit the business, the only people that would buy it would be Staples or Office Depot. So it's attractive. We think we're a community asset. We'd like to maintain that. So, it's interesting concept. Obviously, I'll have to do a lot more research to understand the intricacies of it.
Sure, absolutely. Yeah, we'd be happy to talk with you further, or you can go to the websites the charity put up.
Sure.
And again, this is the sort of thing I think, even if it's just like filing this away and coming back to it in a year or 5 years or whatever it might be, I think it's something it's good to keep in mind. It doesn't have to be something that's going to happen next week.
No, but it's better to plan ahead as opposed to
absolutely,
doing it at the last
absolutely. And
minute.
that's really what we're thinking is that, there's so many businesses out there that don't have a succession plan. Put this in place now and then enact it in 10 years or whatever it might be.
Right.
That's our approach.
I'm not sure I like the silver tsunami.
We didn't coin that.
I didn't make it up. I know.
Can you go back to the org chart a little bit? And I'm placing myself when I worked at Isthmus Publishing, the newspaper. One time we were talking about trying to set up a co-op, and it was before any of this was really out there, and we're not able to figure out how to make it happen, unfortunately. But in many ways, Isthmus at that time when I was there functioned like a co-op, just the mentality of the organization, right? However, every so often we'd get stuck on something, and ultimately the publisher of the paper made the decision, this is what we're going to do, this is how we're going to move forward. Now you don't have that here in this structure with a co-op. How do you deal with that?
You do in the board of directors. Oh, sorry, Steve's got a good answer. I'll finish quickly. You do in the board of directors, and board of directors tends to be an odd number for that purpose, so that you have a tiebreaker decision maker. But go ahead, Steve, you smiled, you had a good answer.
Well, so it's a democratic business and there is no person at the top. And what that means is sometimes meetings can go long. There's a lot of talking, and it can be difficult to break log jams. I can speak from experience. Also, I can speak from hearing about other people's experience. Democracy is not a fast process, but eventually someone will say, look, here's the proposal, let's vote. And that's basically what breaks the log jam. And so, nobody likes long meetings, including me, but what makes it worth it is that the decisions that you reach tend to be better decisions on the whole than if one of us was to just say, hey, we're doing it my way. Because in my experience, all of us are smarter than any of us. Our business would not be here today if I had made all the decisions, because there were things that I proposed that, looking back on them, turned out to be wrong, and I got outvoted. There are also things that I wish had gone other ways, but that's just, that's the nature of the game. I clearly think that it's because of the democratic nature of my business, that we are still here. And I think that plays out across co-ops in general, which is why we have the success rate that I keep coming back to.
So I have one other question, then I'll shut up. And I was just thinking about Gary here. He said he's 10 or 15 years out from really making any changes or adjustments. Is a co-op something that in his case, he could set up in the next year and remain as part of that co-op as the previous owner, and then at some point down the road just step out of that? I assume the answer is yes, but have you had owners that become part of the co-op?
Yes, it has happened. As a matter of fact, I put in the chat that many of the established co-ops here in town are conversions, and in those cases, the owners of the traditional business did in fact stay on as members of the new co-op. So that was the case for Just Coffee. That was the case for Isthmus Engineering. Pretty sure that was the case for Community Pharmacy. Yeah, and I've heard of others around the country as well. So it's an option. You do have to keep in mind that there are going to be some interesting dynamics around, former employees and former employers now being on an equal footing. That's going to be an interesting situation, let's just say. But it can be done. It definitely can be done. And again, there are examples of that happening and happening successfully.
And Northwind Solar that I mentioned is an example of that. It was like, two owners who decided they wanted to run it collectively rather than take on that full role of ownership. So it's that, it met their goals. And there's some good webinars out there that original owner of Northwind Solar is on, and I can dig those up and send them to you. I think it'd be probably really helpful to hear from his perspective of why he did that and what the benefits were.
Well, that's fantastic. Thank you both so much for joining us. It's been very interesting to hear just about the process and all the things to consider and what the outcomes look like. Do you want to just for a second pop back to your contact slide, just in case people didn't capture that information before? And then also before we go, I would mention that I did post in the chat a link to a feedback form that helps us get a sense of what you enjoy about presentations and plan for the future. So we'd love to get the feedback from attendees there as well. And Colin, I don't know if, or Charity and Steve, if you have any final words, or if Colin, you have any announcements.
I'm good to go. Thank you for both of you for your presentation today. Great information here. We're really all set for today. We do have another lunch and learn coming up in April. So we'll be making announcements on that. So we had a little adjustment taking place, but you can keep an eye out for that. And of course, we have the breakfast coming up in March 9th as well. So feel free to join us there. Thanks everyone for being here today, and have a great day.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Thanks very much for having us.
Reach out even just for exploratory conversations and some resources.
Yep, absolutely. We love to talk about this stuff, obviously.
Awesome. Thank you.
Thank you.
Take care.